Hi, everyone. Wishing everyone a very good day. Welcome to the Master Mindset webinar series organized by the Japura Masters Alumni Association and, of course, powered by elearning.lk. So we have here today with us a special person. She's actually my role model in the industry, and I'm so honored to have her here and moderate this session. She was the first woman chairperson of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, and she is none other than Mrs. Indira Malwatte. Hello, Mrs. Malwatte.
Hello, Ruki. And first, let me thank the JMAE for inviting me this evening. And above all, I think the topic that has been selected of an export-led economy is absolutely current. Lots of thoughts on it, which I will share along the way.
Yeah. Thank you very much, madam. And I'll quickly introduce her so that everyone is aware who she is. So she has more than 40 years of experience in serving the government, both internationally and locally, as a top export promotion professional, and she holds a combined degree in economics and geography from the University of Peradeniya. Mrs. Malwatte currently serves as an independent non-executive director for Cargill Ceylon PLC, Samson's group of companies, and Lanka Shipping and Logistics Private Limited. Other than that, she is a consultant for international trade and developing the SME sector, and also for women entrepreneurship. I think we will be able to get a lot of information, insights from her today. So, Madam, we warmly welcome you once again, and it's an honor to have you here as our resource person. So let's kick off the session. I will start with asking this question, Mrs. Malwatte. So everyone, just as you mentioned, everyone is talking about an export-oriented economy or an export-led economy. Why is that important? Why is that so important? And what are the benefits of becoming export-oriented?
All right. About everyone talking about exports it's questionable. Well, I don't think there's enough emphasis on the progress that a country can make with exports. I hear a lot of why aren't people remitting? Why aren't people, tourists coming into Sri Lanka? What is the next loan we can get? I mean, all these are to get dollars into the country. But if you look at exports, it's something that I wish it was export-led economy, but we have a little way to go towards that. Now, exports cannot be the central driver of a country's growth strategy, exports on its own, right? It is one of the pillars for economic development. I think that everybody must be very clear on that. And we need a balanced approach. We need to integrate sort of export orientation into a much broader base growth strategy of a country, because exports cannot stand alone. There's investment, a conducive environment has to be there. It has to be made competitive. So there are lots of things that have to be sort of drawn into making it an export-led growth. And the total commitment, for me, it is the whole of Sri Lanka should be committed to the export growth. I always feel if we could have won the war with one commitment, get into people's heads that exports is the thing that can get us through these difficult times. And we can be self-sufficient, be sustainable without having to be too dependent on all the aid and the loans and everything. Remember, all those we have to repay back. So this is why exports becomes important, because it generates jobs, and I would say quality jobs for the youth of Sri Lanka especially. I'll give a classic example. If you look at the agriculture sector, you go to the plantations, and in the plantations, you have the ladies who have been engaged in that industry for over 150 years. But you set up an export industry, you set up a new for example, growing of strawberries or lettuces or whatever it is under polytunnels and greenhouses, then at once you elevate the people's economic levels also, and their thinking and their attitude, because then they are engaged in an export industry. Although tea is an export industry, unfortunately, when you look at the tea industry, still in the States, it is not an industry that young people would like to get into. So before long, tea industry is going to be, although it's an important export sector, it's going to be faced with problems because the majority of the youth are not going to do that. So it is very important that we exports to be the one that will generate jobs which are acceptable to our youth. That will actually uplift the quality of life of all of us, and especially the future generations to come. And of course, exports is in right now very current in Sri Lanka. The export business is important to cover all our import costs. Part of it is covered by the import costs are covered by exports, the dollars that we earn from that. Then, of course, to serve the foreign debt obligations. We all know where we stand in that. So that again becomes important. Now, these are general things which are important for the country, as a country. Then, if you look at how, as an individual, you can contribute towards exports, besides the current context, you have to diversify your market opportunities, because it will help you in the domestic economy, because when it becomes the domestic economy falters, you have to have a way out for your products. But I must caution people, it is not that you can just export whatever product or service you have. It has to adhere to international standards, be of international quality, meet number of standards, which I will actually talk on later on how a person gets into the export market. Then selling to several markets also helps diversify the risk one has. Take an example, Ukraine and Russia. I mean, after COVID, we all thought everything was tickety-boo, and then comes the war between those two countries. And of Sri Lanka's exports, especially the tea, goes a large proportion goes to Russia and also to Ukraine. So when one country gets affected, you can minimize your risk if you have diversified and exporting to a number of countries. Okay? Then the reduction in production costs even for your domestic industry, because if you increase the purchase volumes for your raw material, it helps you to sort of negotiate better prices, get better quality, and also the delivery times. An export company will have its doors open for foreign suppliers who will look to you to supply goods. And of course, that in turn will help your domestic industry also. Then another factor why one should get into exports is to use the surplus of production. Again, I caution, it's not just your production. You have to have a quality production of international standards, because whatever that is excess, when the domestic market crashes or falters and people don't have that purchasing power, then what happens is, if you are in the export market, you are not compelled to discount your products. You can still use that product and look at an export market. It will also increase our sales volumes, because once the introductory expenses to enter export foreign market is undertaken, then when it's covered, then your increased sales to that particular market will get you better profits. And above all, I think you cultivate new knowledge and experiences when you are in the export industry. You have access to information on new technologies, marketing strategies. You also understand what our foreign competitors are doing. And automatically, this will be assisting in our domestic market also. But I must also give a word of caution. As I said, everybody trying to get into exports, word of caution on it is, you have to be extremely careful, because unless you're careful, you can sort of lose your focus on your domestic markets and your existing customers. So that you have to be careful. And then you have to also understand you're doing export with remote relationships, people who are far away, cultural differences, there can be currency fluctuations. Now, for instance, some of the companies that are already exporting, they faced a lot of supply chain disruptions. Raw material didn't come on time. And similarly, they couldn't ship on time because there were lots of issues related to logistics. And then you can face issues where you have unhappy customer, refunds have to be given, and that costs your business unnecessarily. Yeah. Then you also have to have a higher front cost, because initially when you're introducing a product to a market, you have to do your market research, you have to have marketing campaigns. Then there's, of course, export licensing and documentation you have to get used to. Meeting international standards, which I am a strong believer that you should not be giving the domestic market cheaper quality and have a different standards for the export quality. So whatever you produce, if you start producing, targeting an export market, automatically the local consumer also gets a better product. Then this homegrown thing and import substitution, all that does not come in because you're happy with the export quality that you have within you. So there are lots of benefits, but we have to be committed towards exports. Not only us, the government has to be committed that a conducive environment is given to exporters.
Yeah, definitely. So I believe that if government people are seriously looking on viewing this webinar, they will understand what is actually required. And also it is not only that exports we need, it's just one pillar that everybody is just talking about it without knowing what is the actual situation is. Yeah, just like you mentioned. And also when you were talking about government support and all of that, and we see a lot of strategies drawn up. And it can be, with international organizations, maybe international organizations come here and do a market research on all of that and develop their own strategies. And then maybe the exporters get together and with the institutions, they develop strategies as well. But however, how much of strategies we have, how good is that? Having strategies, implementing that, and taking time to implement, and the commitment we require from the government, the officers, as well as the exporters. What do you like to say about it? How is it supporting, and what are sort of the issues we have?
Yeah, now strategies is something, I think we are experts on drawing up several strategies. With reference to the export sector, so there have been strategies and strategies. Any strategy is useless if you cannot implement it and monitor it closely. And it has to be relentlessly pursued. So, I mean, that is something, the best strategy that you may draw, it can be just sheets of paper and up on a shelf or something. So, I don't believe in us drawing so many strategies, but you have to have a strategy drawn up, and then the commitment. It cannot be the organization which is, for example, here, the Export Development Board can't sit on its own and draw up a strategy because it's just a facilitator. It is the people who eventually benefit are the exporters, and one organization cannot handle it because there are several organizations that get involved in exports. So for me, every officer in any government department related to export, it must be in their DNA. And they have to consider that this is critical for the economic development of our country and do everything within their possibilities to help an exporter to get the product out. Whether it's in quality, whether it's getting their raw materials from customs, whether it is agriculture products that have to come with quality. So right throughout the sectors in Sri Lanka, they have to be totally committed to getting exporter assisted to get their products or services out. It's not only products, it's also services. Now, for example, you take the IT sector. Now, when we drew up the export strategy for 2015 to 2022, which is a 5-year strategy, I must say we took too long on it. But in the sense, because when we started implementing it, it took us a long time. And unfortunately, in our country, when there's a change in government, the strategies get shelved up. But there's a difference in this strategy, which was drawn up, the 5-year strategy from 2018 to 2022, which was to achieve a US dollars 28 billion, because it was not done by the EDB or the government. It was done in consultation with over 750 chambers, associations, exporters, government departments. Everybody was involved, and we took a long time, because we took about 1.5 years with the consultations that we had to do. And we didn't restrict it to the Colombo exporters or the Colombo officers. It was right across from Jaffna to Dondra, to the east to the west. So there was a lot of consultation with the stakeholders. So when a strategy like that is done, and I must also mention this, it was not only limited to, we also consulted the different political parties, because this was something we didn't want anybody to change. It's not cast in stone. I mean, it's a revolving one, but the basic strategies are there. Things haven't changed immensely in Sri Lanka to change the strategy, but maybe post-COVID, you have to relook at the whole thing and start implementing it. Because if we are going to still draw up another strategy, it will take another month of Sundays. And by the time that strategy is done, there may be a change in government. And then we relook at the strategy. This is not relevant only to exports. For me, it is relevant to most sectors, most strategies drawn up within our country, which is very unfortunate. All the professionals put in so much time and energy, and then it can be thrown off overnight. A new strategy comes in. I mean, we have all, in the recent past, we have all realized it, right? So when we decided on selecting the products and the services too, we had a lot of consultations with the industry. We selected the electronic and electrical industry. Then we were the IT and the BPM sector, because we thought that the knowledge economy is very important, and we wanted to keep the IT graduates who come out from the universities and from other institutes to be within Sri Lanka, and for them to have a good job where they can be well occupied. We looked at the boat building industry. And if you recall, Sri Lanka has been in the boat building industry for donkey's years, in the sense when traditional boats used to sail to Sri Lanka to take the spices and the elephants and the gems and all that. There was boat repairing going on in Sri Lanka even then, so many decades ago. Then we also selected wellness tourism, where it was going to combine the Ayurvedic systems of Sri Lanka, the meditation, the good food, all that, with wellness tourism. And not only that part of it, but there were products that were coming out of wellness tourism, which were beauty products, all that, which are now called clean products, without any toxic material in it. That is the future. So when we looked at all these, we took into account. Then there's the traditional sectors, which are spice and concentrates and processed food and beverages. Not that we neglected tea here, but we wanted more value-added products to come out of Sri Lanka. So these are the sort of the sectors. And then we also had the trade support functions, which was trade information and promotion, national quality infrastructure, and of course, logistics, because without logistics, we cannot do any exports from our country. So all those factors were looked at. And above all, we looked at all the policy and regulatory bottlenecks that have been faced. So here, there is no money itself involved. I mean, there were budgets allocated, but lots can be done without the finances, because the policy and regulatory bottlenecks don't need cash. They don't need finance. It is just changing the attitude of most officers, as I said before, to be able to be helping an exporter. For example, if you are going into the IT industry, by the electrical or electronic industry, sorry, by the time you get certain parts to do even a sample, you take a month of Sundays to clear it. By that time, that is outdated. So the clearance at the borders have to be done immediately. So this is the support I'm seeking from government officials for them to be committed into it. So people can relook at the national export strategy post-COVID, and there has to be a driver to this who can relentlessly pursue. If you look at Korea as an example, where President Park had once a week he had the meetings, and he saw to it that whatever that the cumbersome procedures faced by the exporters were resolved. So this is something extremely important that we will have to do. For this, for all this, we have to have a conducive environment.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. So it's basically, even from the last webinar, we understood that it's a lot of attitude. It's a lot of attitude on positive and doing things right at the first time. Likewise, a lot of attitude things which we need to fix, regardless of whatever we do. and
these are things that can be fixed, irrespective of what is going on in the country. We can fix it, this is which is sad. You don't need it's sheer commitment by everybody,
the low-hanging fruits, as you said. Yeah. So now from we know that Sri Lanka has been a nation who was very much into international trade, and we as a nation have many multilateral, bilateral trade agreements. So how would that benefit the exporters, the export market as well? Are we actually utilizing it to the maximum?
On the free trade agreements and other multilateral agreements, especially the free trade agreements, there are lots of issues, the domestic industry comes up in arms when you talk of free trade agreements. But to achieve the optimum benefit for the country, if these agreements are negotiated very, very carefully, taking into account the asymmetries between the economies, so that it will enable a win-win solution to all countries involved. Now, I would take an example. You take the Indian Free Trade Agreement. What a lot of issues we had when we had to implement the Indian Free Trade Agreements. There were people on the streets all against the Free Trade Agreement, that we'll have a flood of products, flood of people. Because remember, free trade agreements are not limited only to goods. It can get extended to services. This is what we found in the Singapore agreement. People are very scared of the services. It's so unfair. A Sri Lankan doctor can go to UK and practice, but we will resist if a doctor from UK or some other country comes into Sri Lanka to practice. But if you have an agreement between a country, you can't have it one way. It has to be both ways. So therefore, people must understand, when we have a very small market in Sri Lanka, that economies of scale won't destined for us to go into production unless we have export markets. And for the export markets, if we can enter a market at zero duty, there's a competitive advantage. You take, as I said, India. Don't we feel very proud when you go into India and see about 175 stores with the sea green damro in Indian cities? Now, that was possible only because of the free trade agreement. And why did he succeed? Not that India doesn't have a furniture industry. He succeeded because he used European designs and was able to give the European designs of that quality at a better rate, and the market was closer. It was just India, just next door. So the logistics wasn't, and the freight rates and things are very, very, very cost effective. Similarly, you look at strawberries. Now, who would think we can export strawberries to India? Who would buy strawberries in India? So you look at the south of India, it's very much closer for fresh fruit and vegetable to get to the south of India, rather than them trucking it down from the north of India. And then you have to look at the products also. Now, for example, strawberries, there was a 25% duty when it came from Australia. But from Sri Lanka, it was zero duty. And it also preserved the freshness of the berries because within an hour it could get across to an airport in India. So there are certain products that you have to identify within the free trade agreements. Similarly, the European GSP Plus is something that we have to take full advantage before it goes off. As it is, it may not, because we have been lowered down to a lower income country. Otherwise, in 2 years, we would have been affected by it. But when you look at the EU, don't look at only the 26 countries. For us, EU means it's Germany, France, Netherlands, countries like that, Italy. But it has 26 other countries other than the UK. So look at the other developing countries within the EU where some of our products can be very well taken. So don't neglect other countries within the EU. Don't look at only the rich countries within the EU. So there are lots of opportunities if we work out our agreements properly so that there's a symmetry and we have a win-win situation for both countries who are in a FTA.
So definitely it's about market diversification. And also, Mrs. Malwatte, we know that a lot of imports are for re-exports. I think somewhere around 80% or more than that. And how is the homegrown policy affecting this matter, being 80% export for re-exports on the imports we are doing? And also, we know that you touched this a little bit earlier when you were talking about becoming an export-oriented economy. It's about the quality of the products. So if you could tie that together, the quality of products and standardization, where they play a very pivotal role, how is homegrown policy affecting us, as well as what we can do to increase the quality of products in Sri Lanka and standardize them?
Coming from my background, I firmly believe in export-oriented policies have fared much better than other policies like homegrown or import substitution. Because exports actually increases performance across the entire economy, as I said before, and it is considered the engine of growth. But paying lip service to that is not this thing. We have to actually start paying serious heed to what it is. It's not only the exporters who get affected by low quality imports or this homegrown policy, because even the domestic industry needs, the local manufacturers need access to cost-effective quality raw materials. Sri Lanka doesn't have all the raw materials needed to do a product, even for the domestic market. We need intermediate goods, we need machinery, we need technical equipment. So all that is necessary even for the domestic industries, more so for the export industries. Now, if you take an example of the textile industry of Sri Lanka, I'm sure all of you may not be even knowing it. We had two textile factories in Sri Lanka called Wayangoda and Pugada Textiles. And we had such horrible material coming out of those two textile, very low quality material, which even as a Sri Lankan, you couldn't you were not happy with it. And but as a result of the apparel sector opening up and the imports of the material coming into Sri Lanka, we started the apparel sector. At that time, it was a cut and stitch operation. But now they have moved into a total solutions provider and accepted internationally within the first 50 countries who are having a successful apparel sector. So if we continued with the homegrown policy of doing our own textiles, not being able to manufacture everything within the country, we would have still been where we were. And 40 to 45% of our export earnings is from the apparel sector. And they have been smart because they have also, to contribute to the homegrown, what they have done is, they have, for example, at Iravur, there's a whole textile zone starting, so that we have also our textiles done in Sri Lanka. The material will be done in Sri Lanka. So if we didn't start at that initial time to cut, stitch and export, we would have never had a backward integration coming into Sri Lanka. So the homegrown and imports substitution for me is sweet music to politicians, to lethargic state officials, and also the lazy, quick buck earning businessmen. That's for me, that's the easiest way of making our money. And with things coming in, unfortunately, our consumers also have no choice. You have to be happy with very substandard goods available in Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka cannot be on its own, so it cannot be homegrown. We have to be a global citizen and be a part of the global trade. We have to be part of the global value chain. Now, you look at an Apple telephone. It's not made in one country. The parts are made in several countries where they have a key strength or where they're far more competitive. And then it is put together in another country which has a capability or which has export-import procedures which are conducive for trading. So if you continue with this homegrown policy, all of us have faced in the last year, we know what the homegrown policy has, what issues it has caused. So I don't think we should be very narrow-minded. We have to be open. We are living in a globalized society, in a world. So there are certain things that can be homegrown, but the majority we cannot if we want to be competitive and be fair by our consumers in Sri Lanka also.
Definitely, definitely. So with this Friday being a holiday for government servants, okay, I see it in your face.
I certainly will be monitoring if I was in a position of authority. I'll certainly be monitoring whether they're actually doing the growing of the vegetables. For me, it is nothing but unfortunately the attitude again. If I was in Ghana, I'll say, no, let's come to work and help the country. Not be at home and be. I mean, people are facing issues, all right, but we have to live with it and try and take a positive attitude as much as possible, because this negativity will bring us down further and further and further.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And also, since you spoke about the value addition, I actually recently saw this on a video where the Indonesian Prime Minister was saying that their way out was when they started doing the value addition. So they said within 1 year, he said they were adding value to steel, and the revenue actually tripled within just 1 year to billions. So what would you like to say about value addition to our exporters and the viewers?
Yeah, I always take this South Korean example because I really admire how they got their exports going. In the 1950s, they were just doing basic marine products, tungsten ore, raw silk, and seaweed. By the 90s, they had gone into shipbuilding, automobiles, electrical products. Now, that is all because they opened the economy and they encourage innovation, R&D within the country. And you must always remember that within the country, you might not be able to have all the technology. You can always buy technology. You can always buy technology and you're at a higher starting point and start from there. Because if you go to do R&D from scratch, that will take a long time. So always remember there is out there technology that is being sold, which we can actually take and adapt to some of our products. So
definitely reinventing the wheel, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. Now in value addition, I must also say one of the important things that were this, you look at the seafood industry in Sri Lanka, how smart Singapore is. Now, we talk of the Singaporean crab dish, which has become a signature dish of Singapore. From where do they get the crabs? They get them from Sri Lanka, okay? And how do they get them? We have farms which do small crabs for a few months, and they export, Singapore imports the small crabs from Sri Lanka, which is then very interesting technology, where they have something like filing cabinets or shelves, where they put these little crabs and they fatten them in those little boxes. So a crab that goes for about 250 grams from here becomes about 2 kilos in Singapore. Now, why is that? Because they have developed the technology. And in fact, I asked them, why can't you do it in Sri Lanka so that we get much more into our country? They said the cost of air freight and the space. So now they have been smart on that. So similarly, we have to look at products where we can be smart. I mean, we have had research and development, but unfortunately, there are very small pockets of research and development that has been done. And what is important is, even with the universities, our exporters and industries must tie up with the university and do the research together. Now, in Singapore, they also have a thing where the top students are taken in by the corporate sector into their industries, and they work together. So it's an opportunity to keep the good graduates within the country, as well as use their knowledge to do more modern products, to do it more effectively, and to be trade competitive. So these are things that I know that we are doing it, but not sufficiently enough. And in order to do that, there has to be encouragement given to the private sector to do so.
Understood. So since you spoke about how individuals can contribute to the exports or the export industry, I would like to know your thoughts on how actually a layman can help in the industry, and how also a person who would like to join the export industry, how can they become exporters? What are the procedures? And they say that it's really hard to get in. So, but I heard that you said it isn't very hard. What are your thoughts on it, Mrs. Malwatte?
It isn't very hard if you're committed to do it, right? It isn't very hard. So I think first what a company, now what lots of our companies try to do is they have a domestic product or a service locally, and they try to plug that into an export market. And that is where they go wrong. Because each market has its different qualities, different ways of doing business. So one thing we must remember is, just because it's a successful product in Sri Lanka, you can't just take it out and market it in another country. Now, for example, you take the jewelry sector. Whatever that jewelry that is manufactured in Sri Lanka, which is mainly of 22 karat gold jewelry, we do it because we have a value given to the gold. So therefore, more than the designs or whatever it is, the value of the gold is very important. But if you try to take that 22 karat gold jewelry with its ornate designs to a market like Germany, you are a failure, because the Germans prefer silver jewelry and they prefer very geometric designs. So you have to understand the market that you're exporting to first. So you can't just take any product and go, this is where people fail. So first you have to take an audit to evaluate the export readiness of your company. You look at your products and your services, as I said, which market you want to export to, take advantage of if there are FTAs or GSP plus or advantage in taxes, whether you can look at some of those products. Then you look at the resources available within your company. You may be doing a product like that, but maybe you could tweak it, or you do some product adaptation, and then it will be suitable for an export market. Then you also look at the resources outside your company, who can help you with some of the items that you need to go. Then, do you have certification? If it's agriculture product, don't think of exporting if you don't have certification. Especially if it's a fresh product, you have to have the global gap. You have to have good manufacturing practices, because those are basics that other countries want, and which we should adopt in Sri Lanka. As I said, our consumers get a better deal if we adhere to all those practices. Then you have to look at your market. What are the market statistics of a particular market you're looking? Who are the other competitors from other countries? What are the products they are exporting to that particular country? How do you differentiate yourself? It's not the same product that you should be. How do you differentiate? Have you something special to offer a country? Now, you take the GI that was got for Ceylon cinnamon, right? There's cinnamon and cinnamon all over, but most of it is cassia. But Ceylon cinnamon has a unique product. So use the GI that Sri Lanka has got very recently and promote your product as origin from Ceylon cinnamon, origin from Ceylon. It's like Darjeeling teas. It's like the champagne. Champagne comes from an area, but you know that the GI for that has given a differentiation in the product. Then you look at the product selection you can offer. Is it one product or do you have a selection of products to offer a buyer? Then you have to look at the pricing, because are you competitive in that market after having to pay all the taxes? Then what's the distribution method you see? Are you looking at an agent? Are you looking at a big distributor? Or is it a one-to-one? Or you start off with someone like a relation that you know who can sort of promote your product? And then, of course, you have to have your sales and goals that you want to set and the terms and conditions of payments that you have to do. So once a product or the service is ready to meet the target market, then you can easily do a sales promotion. And now with the digital marketing campaigns, you don't have to be physically there in a market, which is very, very expensive. You can do it through FB, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I'm sure the young people know much more on it than what I do, but there are lots of digital marketing campaigns that one can do. But you have to ensure that what you are promoting is what you are actually exporting. You have to deliver whatever that is promised. Never ever promise something that you cannot deliver, because it can be totally counterproductive. Then you can also use the services once you know your product is ready. Once you have all the certification, all that, then you can also use the commercial services of our commercial officers. And I must say the ambassadors have become very, very active, and they are economic diplomats now, not just diplomats who are there for just networking. They have become economic diplomats, the professionals, I must say. So use their services. And also there are, of course, trade shows and trade missions which are costly. There are chambers, there's EDB, all of them who organize trade shows and missions, where you have to be there physically. And use the webinars. There are lots of online business buyer-seller meets organized by the chambers and the EDB. First, get on to those so that you minimize your costs at the initial stages. And it's only by the actions of the entrepreneur that they can actually move forward. And don't doubt yourself at all. Don't doubt yourself at all. If you are having a very good product, meeting all the standards I said, it's an opportunity. You might have a setback, but you will also get a feedback so that the next time around, you definitely know where you have gone wrong. You have a buyer telling you, this is exactly how I want it. So you get a feedback. So, but first, you have to have a product being shown to someone. So have faith in yourself. Have faith in yourself and be brave enough to take that chance.
Definitely. Definitely. And Mrs. Malwatte, we have a question from one of our viewers. So they're asking whether EDB provides all this information if they visit there, and whether they can get all this information, and what sort of facilities will EDB provide?
Yeah. To the best of my knowledge, I've left it 2.5 years ago. But to the best of my knowledge, we had a good set of officers who were trained for product development, for products, and also the market. So, I mean, if you take an example there, let's take spices. Now, if you think you're confident you have a good product with good packaging, adhering to those standards, you can actually visit the EDB or get them online. Check who the officer who is handling, because there are different divisions specialized in agriculture, export services, and industrial products. So you can visit, get to one of those divisions. For example, here it will be the agriculture division, and there will be an officer who handles the export of spices and spice concentrates. And that officer is knowledgeable. It's just that you have to extract the information out of the officer, and you could get information on the packaging. You could get information on what size packages have to be sent to a particular market. the quality requirements, the certification that is necessary, and also they will be in a position to say that these are the popular markets for this type of product, and also give insights into those markets. This is how you do it. Now, for example, if I send in something to Japan, it is helpful if it's not only in English, but there's something in Japanese. So in the packaging, and their package sizes are small because their families are small. They won't want 1 kilo of cinnamon. They might want 100 or 150 grams of cinnamon. So that kind of information is available within the EDB, and that's all free information. You don't have to pay anything. So it's a case of the interest of the prospective exporter and how you tap that officer and get that necessary information.
Understood. And I would like to remind our viewers that you can ask your questions on the comment box, and we are live on YouTube as well as on Facebook. If there are any questions, you can jot it down on the comment box, and then we will pick it up and we will ask the questions from Mrs. Malwatte. And Ms. Malwatte, there's another question. It's about the opportunities you mentioned before. So what methods do you recommend to analyze an internal market for new business opportunities? Is there any
internal market or external market?
It says internal market, but I understand it should be external market for new business opportunities. I believe they're talking about diversifying their markets. And is there any recommended websites or organizations, as in the webinars, they're asking what sort of things where they have to look to find these webinars? I believe that you said it was organized by some buyer-seller meetings are also organized by the Export Development Board and the chambers, but I think they're asking about some international organizations who do webinars on these matters.
Yeah, now our embassies, our respective embassies have a lot of very good webinars. And I think how you get connected to that, you have to be in touch with the Department of Commerce and the Export Development Board. So it's a two-way thing. It's like, it's not only the webinar and they talk about the particular product or the market, they also follow up with one-to-one meetings. So if at that opportunity, you have a good product and you can profile it very well, be truthful in your profiling, we profile it extremely well, then I know there are people who have got opportunities, then they are to do a sample export. So I think what the opportunities that you work with the EDB, you work with the Department of Commerce, and of course chambers of commerce. There are two chambers dedicated to exports, which is the National Chamber of Exporters and the Sri Lanka Exporters Association of the Chamber of Commerce. Now, they too have a number of inquiries that come into them. Unfortunately, we haven't had missions coming into Sri Lanka, but there are outward and inward missions that are there. So right now, it will be more on digitally that you could find a buyer. And for that, you have to have your optics all done so that it becomes very attractive. But please offer only what you can deliver to them. Don't promise, don't overpromise, even in the quantities. So if you're a small person and you can only give, say, 50 packets of 150 grams of cinnamon, just promise what you can give. Don't say, oh no, if I get an order for 250, I can quickly collect it from here, there, and package and send it. No, it will affect your quality, it will affect your company's name. So only offer whatever you can within your company and where you can assure them of the quality. I emphasize on quality because this is something that we have been weak. As a nation, we are weak on quality, whether it's work or products or services. As a nation, unfortunately, we are weak on quality. We just want to do something and then just finish it off. But when you're exporting, quality is something that you have to sleep over, think over before you do.
Definitely.
I hope I've answered.
Yes. Yes. And also another question from my end, actually. So how can we improve the trade competitiveness of SMEs to compete in the global market? I know you have been telling about it from the start, but if you could sum it up and give a couple of pointers for people who is joining, our viewers.
I think the critical factor is to be innovative, to be trade competitive, because as I said, if you produce the same thing that your neighbor is producing and you try to export it, it won't work. It won't work. So you have to be very creative in your thinking, be very innovative, and go into very, very innovative products. And for that I said that you have to put in a little research and development. There are lots of young graduates I have met at some of these places where one of my organizations organizes to promote SME sector. There are fairs locally to promote. I've seen some wonderful products from coconut, how they have coconut flour, and these are all young graduates, which is so gratifying. They're all engineering graduates, right? But they have used their engineering mind and what would I say, the discipline to get in to a product, agriculture product, from their packaging to what they have innovated in using coconut products is amazing. So it is, I think, the trade competitiveness also comes with, of course, the government coming with where we have to improve our work skills. We are building complex skills that are necessary, the human capital, which is necessary for more sophisticated global economy. But don't wait for government to do it. Hats off to SLASCOM, I think. Hats off to SLASCOM. Now, more recently, I mean, we started off with BPO, BPM kind of operation. Now they have gone into assisting people moving into gaming and the immersive technology industry. Now, government didn't tell them to do that. It is the private sector who thought of it, and they have moved into those sectors. So, and then you become trade competitive because it is something that someone else is not doing it, but you are in a position to give that to them. So for me, it is creativeness, the entrepreneurship in a person, the innovativeness, and how much you are willing to put into R&D, which is time taking. You can't do it overnight. So to be trade competitive, I think all those things have to be put into place, because remember, not only Sri Lanka, lots of other countries are trying to sort of reignite their economy by getting into exports. And they can be smarter than us. But we also can be smart if you have all those ingredients that I said.
Definitely. I think a lot of things, I believe, who are interested here would have taken notes on these things, because you will not get this information again. And there are a couple of other questions, Mrs. Malwatte. One is, okay, it says, if we are to get tax reduction on certain raw materials, how can we request that from the government? I'm quite not sure whether you can...
the customs has a duty rebate scheme where you can get your raw materials, if it's for exports. If it's for exports, you can get it into a bonded warehouse. You could get into a bonded warehouse, and then you can have the duty concessions. But it has to be in bond, and there's a system. Of course, your factory may not be in bond. You might be manufacturing for the domestic market and for the export market, but you have to maintain your books very carefully, that whatever that you have imported for exports is done that way, and that you are not sort of using it for the domestic market. There are lots of people who in fact bring even packaging for a local product, because they do the same product, but the packaging is different for the export market and for the domestic market. So this packaging, the same product goes into two packaged products. One is for the domestic, but one is for the export. So, but you account for the packaging that you imported for exports separately. So customs has that scheme, and actually there is also, to get more information on this, you can go to the export there's the trade and export division of the EDB, where you can get this information, the number of, or go on to the EDB website. The website has, if you want to import certain products, raw materials, all that, how you do it, and you can always get the help of officer there of how you work yourself on that.
I believe it's the trade information and trade promotion.
That's the trade information. You're right.
And there's another question, Mrs. Malwatte. Okay, this is regarding packaging materials. So what they're saying is packaging materials are getting really expensive. Do you recommend outsourcing it from a country like China? Because we are scared if we can't open LCs, we cannot bring them down to Sri Lanka.
If it's for export, they should certainly be allowed. Sri Lanka has a good packaging industry, I must say. Sri Lanka has a good packaging industry because that's also an export product of ours. Because when you look at all the tea companies in Kenya and some of the African countries, all their packaging is exported from Sri Lanka. So it depends on what the packaging is. If it is not available, you'll obviously have to outsource it. And again, if it is brought to a bond for exports, or you don't have to pay foreign exchange, you come to an arrangement where you don't have to pay the foreign exchange, then it goes back to the buyer. Or you can always ask your buyer to send the packaging material, because that's one way where dollars out of the country won't go. And then the import control can give you permission where if the packaging is only for exports and there is no dollars paid for it, it comes as no foreign exchange basis. But first they will check whether it's not available in Sri Lanka. That will be checked.
Definitely, you will need checkpoints.
Yeah.
And also, there's a quick question because we have only about 3 minutes more. The importance of BRC certification.
That if you are doing to UK, I presume it's the UK certification he or she is talking of, it is important. It is, international certification, whether it's BRC or whether it's global gap, is extremely important. A case in point, when I left government some time ago, I was in an exporting company. I myself was an exporter, like anyone who is listening to this or interested in exports. And we were doing strawberries. And we were the first company to have got the global gap certification in Sri Lanka. We just had this, we couldn't do it professionally. We just did a sticker and put it in our booth that berries were global gap certified. Just that. And what a difference it made. That is because there were so many others. We weren't the only berry people. There were so many others who were around who were not certified. So certification means food safety. Is food safety for people to be able to, and especially something like berries with a very soft skin. If you're global gap certified, you are able to market it better. Similarly, BRC, it is a certification both for your importer and for the consumer to say that you are having something absolutely safe because it has gone through a process of checks and balances during production, from the harvesting to production, all that it has gone through this process, and therefore you're absolutely sure what the product you're using, whether it's consumer, whether it's something that you consume or whether it's something that you handle, that it is absolutely safe, like using non-toxic paints for children's products. All that has to get certified. So BRC is important depending where you're exporting to and whether the buyer wants that particular certificate. Just don't do the certification if the buyer doesn't want it. Speak to your buyer and ask what certification do they require in that particular market.
Thank you very much. And as the final question, what would you like to say to the budding exporter as a message? I think the entire webinar was actually a consolidated message, but yeah.
Yeah, for me, it is take that leap of faith. Have faith in yourself as long as you do a good product. As I said, all those things that you need to have in a product or a service, and have confidence in yourself that that you can export. You try or export. First one might be a failure, but you learn from that. Always speak to the buyer. If he has wanted it, you have sent it, and he says, I don't want it again. Ask them what it is, and then improve. So continuous improvement will eventually get you to reach there. There are exporters who have tried, for example, the safety belt, the little, the safety sensors that are done for safety belts in Sri Lanka. I mean, that exporter tried more than 15 times with his buyer, and eventually he succeeded. So never give up.
Awesome. I think that's the message we have. Never give up and take that leap. And thank you very much, Mrs. Malwatte, for joining with us today. And we are honored to have you here once again. And I hope all our viewers had a very good understanding on exporting and the markets and what you have to do as well. And thank you very much to our viewers for very interesting questions. I believe we have answered your questions thoroughly. And if there's anything, you can reach out to us so that we can ask Mrs. Malwatte about your questions and revert back to you. And yeah, so it was an interesting session, Mrs. Malwatte. It was a pleasure to have you here today. And
good luck to the prospective exporters of Sri Lanka. We all need you for the country. And have a positive attitude. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Malwatte. And we will conclude our session today on the Master Mindset webinar series organized by the Japura Masters Alumni Association and also powered by elearning.lk. And stay tuned for the next webinar. Until the next webinar. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thanks.
And good night. Thank you very much.